All right, welcome back for week 2 of talking about faith. We are back with Michaela and Suzy and Chris. And yeah, we are talking today, I think, more on the lines of what is our role in our faith? Last week we talked about what is faith to each of us, kind of what is God's role in defining our faith and building it up. And yeah, this week we want to talk more about our faith. I think as a muscle, it's a pretty good metaphor. It's something that you have to exercise. We're all humans. So we know that physically, if we don't exercise, then our muscles get weaker. When you exercise, your muscles, your lungs, your heart get stronger over time. It's not a perfect metaphor with faith, but I think it's a good
it's
place
close.
To start.
It's pretty close to perfect. Because so I had a season of my life where I felt like the primary thing I needed to do was go make money to support my family. And I put my head down and I went to work for 12 to 14 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I didn't really think a ton about my faith. I didn't really think a ton about...
You didn't think a ton about anything. There wasn't anything.
I was just grinding to try to pay the bills. It was during a career shift for me. And at the time I made that career shift, she wasn't working for a little bit of that. And so, we were a single income family with 4 kids in the Bay Area. So it was just all consuming to go out and make as much money as I could make, which required a lot of effort. And my faith atrophied as a result. And we had to go through a season of rest and healing. And God was kind and gentle and took us through that, for sure, a difficult season. But he found ways to rebuild our faith during that time of rest for us. And so then when we eventually found Echo, our sending church, we were ready. We were rested and ready and healed up, ready to get back in and serve in the church. And what we found at that point was, for me anyway, I felt like I was on this rocket ship journey, to rebuilding my active faith.
Why do you think that faith works that way? Why isn't God just ding, you now have all the faith? What is the role that we play? Why do you think that God asks us to work towards that, to participate, to flex that muscle, so to speak? Why doesn't God just give you all the faith in the world, perfect obedience and trust, and it's easy? Why is it not easy all the time?
Well, I think, that's a loaded question, for sure. But when you are ding, it made me think of your faith is not a microwave. It can't be this instant thing. So often we want results to happen instantaneously. And God is a God, he's gentle, and we have had free will from the beginning. And that goes into the faith process as well. We have the freedom to choose to partner with him in this journey.
Yeah.
Or we have the freedom to not partner with him.
It's not about the reward either.
No.
It's the process almost.
It's the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Any thoughts, you guys?
Yeah, I think we're finite in our being, right? Which means we have our limits. God is infinite; he does not have limits, but he understands that we do, and so he takes us on this journey, like you guys just mentioned. That's a step at a time. If you took, you guys are soccer players, right? Imagine you
Sometimes.
took Pele. Pele's a name everybody. You guys know Pele, right? You know that name?
Yep.
And he's a soccer player, one of the greats.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I just want to make sure we're all together.
I'm going to hit him.
So
he's going to have faith built right here.
You guys have a couch I can sleep on? I have faith that your couch is comfortable. If you took 5-year-old Pele, even though he turned out to be maybe the most legendary soccer player the world has ever seen, if you took 5-year-old Pele and put him on the field with professionals, it would never work. He's just not developed enough. I mean, back to your muscle analogy, which I think is a much more complete analogy than maybe you originally thought, because he had to grow into the natural gifting he was given, right? And in much the same way, we're all growing into this natural gifting that God has given us. But it takes time. It's a process of deposit, lesson, exercise, failure, lesson, exercise, success, lesson, exercise, failure, lesson, exercise, success. And each time, what he asks of us grows greater and greater. And that's the thing that, like you said in the last week's episode, that we never really saw ourselves church planting. And I think that's true. But the reason we are planting this church is because we've engaged in the process of faith development over the years, very imperfectly, but we've been open to God developing levels of faith in us that has brought us to today, which hopefully is one of God's greatest fulfillments in our lives, is just that we give him our yes for whatever he asks of us. And there's a faith in believing he's going to fill our gaps.
It's almost like comforting, because you get to, I think at first I was like, oh, it's almost frustrating. It's like, oh, it'd be nice if you could just have faith. But I think you maybe used the line last week, Suzy, of like, God meets us where we're at in our faith. And there's some comfort in that. What were you going to say?
I have two thoughts. One was last week, Chris, you had mentioned, you're like, there's nobody like all the heroes of faith that are in the Bible. There's not just like us there. And I'm like, yeah, there is. Like, I don't like Jacob in the Bible. Like, I don't. I'm just always like, why did God choose him? And then I'm like,
child of God too.
Yeah. He's a child of God too. But like, also, how, like, why did God choose me? And there's so many things that I think, as we read the Bible, as we, don't just take the Bible stories, me growing up in the church, I kind of just gloss over. I'm like, yeah, Daniel and the lion's den. Got it. I saw the picture book.
I know that one.
I have a picture. Yeah, got the oh, that's a throwback.
Wow.
Bring it back. Chant with me. No, yeah. You just kind of think the stories.
Can we edit that out?
And so it but like, there's people that really just were like flawed, deeply flawed. And so it's so encouraging to know that God chose, and he used what was available to him, which are broken people. We're all broken people. And the fact that we look at them and say, like, that is a hero of the faith, Elijah, right? Elijah, that was the first one. And he just like battled with depression and just like had a very deeply skewed perspective of when he's like, I'm the last servant of the Lord. And that was not true. There was, all these other people that were actually servants of the Lord. But he was choosing to focus on how he felt. And how often do we get caught up in our feelings? That's me. And but how much did God used him? He used him so mightily. The second part that I was going to mention is to your question, Mark, where you're saying, why doesn't God just like microwave faith? And I was thinking about, we are designed from a place of dependence. You think about hunger. We're designed with stomachs that can hold food, digest it beautifully, and we're hungry again. We are day to day, absolutely dependent. That's by design, in a very simple, practical way of how our bodies operate. And we don't feel it in the same way, but that's the same way that our faith operates. We are moment by moment, absolutely dependent. We just don't have that physical stomach to remind us of it. But that is how we're meant to operate, just from this place of like open hands. God is talking about meditating on what it's like to be a bird that doesn't have a storehouse for stuff, but just depends moment by moment. I have a good creator who's watching out for me, and I don't know what it'll look like, but
and the practice of fasting, right, is a way that we can, a spiritual practice, a way to attempt to, like, in our minds, to tie the physical hunger to the spiritual hunger, right? And build our faith in a different way through this avenue of everything you just described with our stomachs and the fact that we get hungry quickly physically and tying that in.
But this partnership in life is in the nature of God. And I promise I won't go down the Michael Heiser rabbit hole again, but there's this whole spiritual side that we don't see with our physical eyes. And in the spiritual realm, God chooses to work in partnership with other spiritual beings that he's created. And so there's this whole spiritual family of God that's in existence. And the dynamic relationship at work between God and those spirit beings is very similar to the dynamic relationship at work between God and us physical beings, where even with them, there's evidence all throughout the Old Testament, especially, where we see him like working with and through these other beings, right? Even to interact with the physical world that we see today. So it's from the beginning of God's creation, so far as we have a record in Scripture, he is a collaborative God. He wants to exist in the context of relationship, but he also, and I think somebody mentioned it in our last episode, this desire for free will. And because if he forces us to love him, he creates robots, there's no reward in that for him, right? There is no return of love for him. And so our faith growing step by step and us working the process with him draws us closer to him in relationship, which then strengthens our faith muscles for the next season that draws us even closer to him in relationship. And that relationship is the end goal of why God created every one of us.
Yeah. I feel like what I was thinking about is when I asked the question, or did the ding, like Microsoft Faith or microwave.
Microsoft.
Another sponsor. Hey. We got more room on the cup. We were joking about sponsors. Oh, yep. Microwave Faith. I think we kind of all laughed when I said that. I think a lot of people actually think that though, of like, I see that person, I see the lead pastor, like, I mean, even for me, I've thought it plenty of times of like, man, like Pastor Felipe, he has like so much faith. Like I want that. And we want it tomorrow or right now without doing the work. And I think a lot of people have that, whether they realize or go through that full thought process. And if they like realize it explicitly, like I want this and I want it to be easy and fast. But I think we all kind of look at the saints, whoever that is in your life, whether it's a parent or a head pastor or elder, whoever it is, where we like, man, they have so much faith. I want that. Yeah. And I don't really want to do the work, but there is work to do, like to get, that didn't just happen for any of those people overnight. And so maybe the question I'll throw out there is for each of you, maybe the past month or past year or whatever first comes to mind, like what spiritual practice has grown your faith the most in terms of last week was all about not our job, but this week is like your role doing the work, putting in the hours at the gym, to go back to our metaphor, like for you personally, because there's a lot of different ones. We could make a laundry list, but on the personal level, like for you, what has grown your faith the most in terms of those hours that you feel like you've put in?
Yeah, I know the most impactful thing for me, I think, is reminding myself of what God says to me and about me. You know, I read in the last episode that little blurb that he gave during our 24-hour prayer session. Yeah. And the reason that was so impactful to me was it's like recorded now. And he took me back to it this week after getting news I didn't want, right, with the partnership. And it was like he gave me this little deposit of, it's going to be hard. Like, you did not sign up for an easy thing, but it's okay. I'm in it, whether it's difficult or it's not. And just like reminding myself that just because something doesn't go the way we want, that God is still in control, and I can trust that. So giving myself that reminder and allowing the Holy Spirit, when he sees fit, to remind me of those things helps a ton when you're sitting in a quiet room, you know, with the lights out at night trying to go to sleep, but you can't shut your brain off. You know?
Yeah, that's good.
I think for me, going back to many, many years ago, when we kind of were all in for marriage ministry, and we just knew that we wanted to invest in marriages because we wanted to be the generation of change for our family, and we didn't know what that looked like. And so we wanted to go into marriage ministry, and we wanted to volunteer. And every time we would go to volunteer, we were kind of open-handed with it, like, wherever you want us, Lord. And he kept putting us in the prayer room, and that was not where I wanted to be. And, you know, for him to stretch our faith in that way, to stretch our obedience in that way, and if you truly say you're open-handed with whatever you want, Lord, are you going to trust me in doing the thing you don't want to do? And, you know, year after year, continuing on that path to now where people are like, you literally have the gift of faith, where, you know, God bless Chris, he's the logical one, and he has to deal with my, you know, God said to do this, I'm going to quit my job for the second time, you know, like, or I'm going to apply for a job that we're going to wait months to hear an answer for, and only one job, and not know the outcome, but have the faith to just be all in, whatever that looks like. Took over 20 years of doing things that I didn't want to do, that we didn't want to do, and just trusting God with it all and going, this isn't what I thought our faith was going to look like. This isn't what our journey we thought was going to look like. But we surrender it to you, and it's a constant surrender of the unknown, of uncertainty. But it's just easier every time you do the step to surrender and just go, I'm going to choose to have the faith, to believe God at his word. He is who he says he is, and he loves us. And so I don't have to question whether or not it's the faith of a mustard seed, like so tiny is a mustard seed.
Yeah.
We can do that. We can do that.
But God's history of showing up for us matters. And I think this is part of the faith journey too. You know, we talk about microwaving versus, you know, slow cooking like a pot roast, right? Is that all through the Old Testament, God would do something incredible for the nation of Israel, and then he would tell them what?
Remember.
Yeah, build a monument here.
Yeah.
So you remember.
Yep.
And then when the time came that they had homes, he said, write my law on your doorposts. Like, put it everywhere. And remember the things that I've done. Because he was building his own case for his faithfulness in our lives. And the more we see God be faithful to us, the more it grows our faith that he's going to continue to do that thing. So when you walk into a room and you flip the light switch, do you ever doubt the light's going to come on?
No.
Because the light in your apartment or your business or your home has taught you that when you flip that switch, the light's going to come on. It comes on every time. Do you ever doubt the sun's going to come up in the morning? Nope. Why? Because every morning the sun comes up.
California.
And well, sometimes it doesn't show depending on where you live. But, you know, there's this this pattern of faithfulness from God in our lives. And our ability to release a little bit more, to let him do bigger and bigger things in our lives, for us to take bigger chances, is required over time for us to have the faith, the trust in God that he's going to deliver. You know, when we decided to plant this church, you know, she still works outside the church plant. but my salary is, I make the bulk of the money in our family, right? More than she does. And so going into this church plant, if it fails, it directly impacts our family's livelihood, right? Like in a really significant way. And so there's significant personal risk to it. There's a risk of relationship. What happens for all these friends that we've invited to come along on this journey with us, right? Are Mark and Michaela still going to love us if we fail miserably at this? What is this going to look like? All these different risks. And, in the end, we could choose to shrink back in fear, or we could choose to believe what God has spoken into our lives. Yeah. We've not made it up. It was not our desire. It's not my desire to leave a big church, cozy job that, I could do. And you guys have similar stories, like your story you shared last time about staying in the Bay Area. And we all hopefully have those stories. And certainly the longer you walk with Jesus, the more of those stories you have, and the more significant those stories become. And I said this in an episode not too long ago. I think in our group, there might be as many as 5 church planting couples on our launch team. And
there's only 22 of us.
And you can all look around the room.
And there's only 4 couples, so you do the math.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's from the Lord. I'm just saying that I believe there's great potential if God calls for that. And I think the people on our team will, and I think we're building a community as a result of those people. I think we'll have a community that births more church planters because of the combined faith of our community. I feel like it's very significant. And that's going to birth more faith in others.
Yeah.
How about for you?
No, it's your turn first. I asked the questions.
Not always.
That's my job.
Yeah. The power hierarchy has changed when I'm on
Michaela's
this.
The new podcast host. You heard it here first.
It's more so that I just want to hear.
Okay, I do have an answer.
Too.
Yeah. In the relatively recently, I think Michaela's also just buying more time. Very smart.
150%.
She's very clever. I think for me, it is like the first thing that came to mind, and I think it's a constant enough theme that I think I feel good about it as my answer is just like hearing God's voice and reaffirming that, and like that when we talk about things that God says that's true, is that like I can hear it, and that he is speaking. Like I think those are the two things that kind of reaffirm that faith. And like I know a few weeks ago when you wrote something down that you feel like you got from God during the 24-hour prayer. I had shared this story with a couple of people in our group. Like it was my first 24-hour prayer that I had ever done. We were at the overnight crew, and we were the graveyard shift. I had an idea of what a prayer night was going to look like, which was more silence and less worship music. And
we did just not too long ago have a conversation on this podcast about how you're wired and what you need for concentration and focus
and creativity.
Which is not what you experienced.
Nope, that was not what I experienced, which is not a problem, but it was very frustrating that night because I felt like everyone else was like, man, God gave me this word. And I was just like, the only thing in my brain is the last verse of whatever song is playing.
Nothing.
But I could talk more about that. But coming out of that night, I was like, man, everyone else is hearing God's voice. I wasn't. And then the next worship and prayer night that we had on Tuesday, we split up into groups at one point to pray for each other. And Suzy and I were in the same group, and it was like pray for each other. I think we maybe did specific requests at first, but then also made sure that I think Suzy had said, like, also think about like if the Holy Spirit's revealing anything else that somebody didn't specifically ask for, and pray for that. Which I've done plenty of times before, and not super frequently have actually like heard or felt something. When you talk about being more of a thinker, like that concept is just like insane. Like it makes no sense. Like, what do you mean I'm just gonna have a thought and it's not from me? what, how, like,
Yeah.
what is that? But I mean, in
Which
this
makes
instance,
that a very threatening environment.
yeah, it's
It's
uncomfortable.
very intimidating. Maybe is
Yeah.
a better word than threatening.
It's intimidating, and you can't put like a finger on it to understand. You don't. It's not something you can explain or grasp the
Or
concept
systematize.
as much as or systematize.
And when you're naturally risk averse, like a lot of thinkers are, it makes you feel much more vulnerable to say, "Hey, Michaela, I think this might be from God. I don't know if this is going to resonate with you, but
yeah.
X, Y, Z."
And yes, we were in the same group. I felt like I had gotten this word, and I prayed. The way that the order just worked out, I was going last, and I was like, yeah, this word like makes sense. I agree with what it is. Speaking of writing it down, I don't think I did, and I think the word was peace. No, what was it? Rest. Okay, I was pretty close. So this just adds more credibility to what we're talking about with writing things down. But yeah, so Suzy actually prayed before I did, and she said, for this couple, I feel like the word I'm getting is rest. And like out loud, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, are you serious? That's crazy. Like, that's the word I got. And it was just
Mark just wanted attention. No, just
it was just a beautiful reminder, because it was, I don't know, 3 days after the 24 hours night of prayer. And there's been other instances like that, but that was the biggest contrast and reminder and building up of that faith. I think there was 1 or 2 things at the men's retreat, and Michaela's been really great at encouraging, kind of going back to the gym metaphor of like personal trainer of like, hey, before you go up to the men's retreat, like just make sure you like ask God if there's a word for somebody, if you're in a small group or if you're praying. And it's like, oh yeah, that's a good reminder, because it's not my natural tendency.
Right.
So going back to building that muscle, it's the reminder to pay attention. It doesn't always come, but if you're not paying attention to it at all, you're almost guaranteed to miss it.
Yeah,
So.
but I also think, like, we talk about how we influence other people, right? And how, our faith builds others' faith. And and I think I was so excited for you in that moment because of how excited you were.
Yeah.
But I was also excited for the people that it was for, because it's like a double confirmation that is coming from the Lord. And for people that are walking through something, we can understate how significant it is when we have these moments where God wants to encounter people, but maybe they are resistant, maybe they haven't had experience with it. And so when there's multiple people that are willing to just enter into that space where they're like, okay, God, like you're really speaking to me, and discern that voice of God, it's so impactful to
And I did that night. I was like, it wasn't like a big deal. Like it was a big deal for them, but for me it was like a little small thing. And you're like, no, like this is a big deal. And you're like, don't belittle it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the role of community, and having different strengths and having different strengths and weaknesses is so important, because like even in the community of our marriage, it is more my gifting to I don't even know, just like be empathetic, be more of a feeler, I suppose. Of
sensitive.
Just like,
you're much more sensitive to those things.
Yeah, which at one point I thought was a weakness. Shout out to those who are sensitive. It is not a weakness. It is a huge strength. Sometimes it feels like a burden, but it is a strength. And but it's sometimes. Like sometimes it's a lot. It's a lot. But it also means, and there's so many strengths that Mark has that he encourages me in. But in this particular thing, it is more my strength to say like, hey, just be aware that this is a great opportunity for you of going to men's retreat and being aware of those around you, because God has consistently seated you in places of mentorship, and I have a feeling he's going to do that again. Stuff like that, of encouragement, having people that have a gift of encouragement to just say, that is not a small thing. Don't belittle this even if it's like 12 tiny stones that you're stacking on top of each other, talking about the Israelites going through, the Jordan and building a monument to what God's done, even if it's like just a little one of like, this matters, and do not belittle the work that God's doing. And so the gift of community just being huge in that. And there was another point that I had.
But I while you think about that other point, I'm just going to put my Mark hat on. What I'm hearing is that engaging in community is an intentional act that we can make, or a step we can take in order to help develop more faith in our lives. Yeah. Right. I think there's a lot of truth to this concept even of shared faith, where like we were at a conference last October, or actually I don't think you went because you were working, but I went to, because you were in Lancaster. Exponential, the name of the conference had left me, which is primarily a church planting conference. And, we were sort of in that beginning phase of people finding out we're church planting and all that. And there was a guy that I'd seen around a little bit. I didn't really know him all that well. I'd met him once or twice in kind of social settings. And I'm talking to somebody, and he's beelining out to go to a session or something. And he stops in the doors. He's leaving the building. He stops, and he spins around. He's a big guy with a big imposing beard, And he goes, I want to hang out with you. Whatever you're lacking faith for, I've got faith for you. And he turned around and he walked out. But it was like this big moment, this dramatic thing. And I was like,
did he point at you?
He did. Yeah, he was pointing at me. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And in my mind, I'm like, I texted that guy a month ago and he hasn't answered me yet. So I don't know how much he wants to hang out with me. But it was a really funny moment. But it was like, oh, I received that. Like there are others out there that believe this thing can be done, and so there's this feeling of being in community and a shared faith.
That's is so important. I think the other point that I was gonna talk about is the importance of mentorship within that, because like in that particular instance of a group where we have somebody that's learning to discern more clearly God's voice, somebody who's a couple steps ahead, in that journey. It's so important to because as humans, a lot of time we can just so easily just say, that's not a big deal. Like I want to experience this kind of breakthrough, not whatever that was, or to dismiss the progress that is actually happening. But when you have people that are a couple steps ahead that can recognize like, no, that's a seed of faith. That is actually breakthrough, because I remember and that was monumental step for my journey, and recognizing it. So it's that kind of having people at different stages in their journey, but also just keeping yourself in community to be able to experience that. It's so important. And then now you also being able to recognize and call that out in people that are now a step behind you is so important.
Super theological and super biblical, right? Because Paul told Timothy, take what I've taught you and teach it to those that are behind you, essentially. This is the principle you're talking about. I mean, it's very biblical. And there is something, it's actually something that one of our youngest son, Noah, one of his teachers said to us during a back to school night recently, that he sits at his group table in this class and he helps others learn the material. And she said, there's something special that happens in our brains that helps us remember things, principles, when we learn it, and then we try to help someone else learn it. We teach it. It seats it even more in our soul. So it's a very powerful dynamic of living in community and engaging in mentorship, two-way mentorship.
Yeah, and I think it also can build your faith by going through a community faith, as we're building this church plant, and there's so many opportunities for us to exercise this faith together. And will we stand strong in faith together in belief that God is going to do what God says he's going to do? And will we trust it when, what is going to be our response when the answer is no? And is that going to build our faith, or is it going to deflate our faith? we have an opportunity to partner with God in all of it. But how we partner in God is also directly correlated to those in our midst, because it's directly correlated to their faith as well. And not only is God partnering with us, but the people in our community are partnering with us. And so we have a responsibility in our faith to grow in that and know that we're not always going to get it right, but inviting people into the messy part of faith is really powerful.
Yeah.
I'm a hyper responsible person, and sometimes that's
big chuckle from Suzy.
Really, that was a big chuckle.
Not even stifled or
Let me
anything.
rephrase that.
I mean,
I think I'm a hyper responsible person, which is
a
to
funny phrase, hyper responsible.
yeah, which is to say I'm a perfectionist and I want to be super buttoned up in all the stuff we do, right? Well, the dark side of that is there's a lot of benefit, but there's a pretty big dark side. And that is I tend to think the outcome is more dependent upon me than it really is in life. And so I think some of what you were alluding to in your comment a moment ago was practicing this faith together is all of us that are inviting people to consider joining our church plant and helping us, you know, with liftoff. And it's very easy for me to become controlling and to grab hold of all of the responsibility and try to force feed people around me why they need to come and do this. And when I find myself feeling the stress of getting a no, when I find the stress of somebody not answering a text invitation, I can begin to take it personally. And those are sort of indicators for me, often not as early as they should be indicators for me, but at some point I become aware of it, that I'm holding too much responsibility. And so my life actually gets a lot easier when I have a more accurate view of myself and my capability and capacity, frankly, but also my tendency to try to be controlling, which eventually leads to me being manipulating to try to get my way, to force things to happen, right, when I start to spiral into unhealth.
Come up with a better strategy.
Yeah, to try to find a better strategy or whatever, you know. But the right answer in those situations is simply to open my hands again and say, God, this is your thing, and our job is to steward the part you ask us to steward, not to hold control. But that in itself is an act of faith, right? Releasing control of this thing, because for me, he's called us to do this, and so I have my part to do. But what is my part? And it gets very murky in the crossover between my part and his part. And I get that wrong all the time, and usually it ends up with me being in a bad mood or discontented in some way. But then when he brings me back around, it's like, okay, I'm reminded again. Faith. This is what faith lived out looks like. It's, you know, living with open hands and letting people come and go as Jesus leads them to come and go.
That's good. Did you have an answer to the my question from 30 minutes ago?
You're so nice to her about it.
Yeah. What was your
the question again?
My question was, in the past year or whatever time frame makes sense for you personally, what has been a practice or something that God's been working on you with to build your faith? Those, like, that time in the gym metaphor of like putting in the work that for you personally has increased your faith, whether it's the past year or a couple of years for Suzy, maybe it's just the past month, whatever came to mind.
Again, what a good question. Mark is so good at questions. I think what immediately came to mind, and it doesn't fit into a nice perfect box of like a spiritual practice of like fasting or scripture or solitude or any other John Mark Comer that he fits in, which I love. I genuinely love his books. But It has really been for me a season of just like waiting with God, and being completely satisfied by everything that I'm doing is starting from the private place, the secret place with God. 100%. There's so much of what, it's just been a season of God just saying, will you do it all for nobody's acknowledgement? Which for me, excuse me, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but I'm also I'm hugely motivated by people saying like, good job, like this is really cool, like I love this about you, or you
get a gold star.
Gold stars. They started bringing them to my Bible study that I'm a part of because I requested them so much. And so they actually brought
producers. Can you make a note of that? We need gold stars from Michaela.
Genuinely, they brought them.
Maybe we just drop one on the screen for her right here. Ready? Bing.
The cost is too much, actually.
Too much.
we can't afford.
We don't have that animation budget.
No, but genuinely, they. I think it's because a lot of the ladies are teachers, so they had them on hand. I don't think it was special order, but.
It could have been. You're worth the special
You're worth
order.
the special
Yes.
order, Michaela.
Thank you guys. I needed that. No, but they
You're getting a double high five after this recording's done.
Oh, what's a gold star?
I don't have any.
They did that for me as kind of a joke, but that speaks to, I think, the level of, like, that's how I was motivated as a kid. I will do anything to basically achieve. And I feel like everything that I look at, God was just like, will you do it for absolutely nothing other than the pleasure of being with me? And that is really hard. If it, like, think about what you're most motivated by, and then just being like, but would you do it for not that? And would it still mean, would you do it for not that? And it's taken me to really this place of deep, I keep talking about identity because that's what's been on my heart so much. And it's really where, I mean, the book that you guys had put me on to, Spiritual Authority by Dr. Rob Reamer, has been huge. Have I finished it? No. Have I reread like every chapter? Yes.
Great news. He has a soul care conference coming up in August in LA.
Sponsorship would be great. Right.
Where are we on the cup
patch.
now?
Yeah.
Around here.
We got Microsoft. We got
get it while the real estate's good, guys.
Yeah.
No, but it's been so huge of understanding, like, okay, when you boil it down, where does this start? And it all starts from this place of identity in God. And I feel like he just stripped back everything to say, like, will you do it just to find your identity in me, not for the gifts that you'll get? Even if I've had an injury for 3 years that should have been a 1 to 2 year injury, and I'm going on 3. And so for me, the question that God always asks too is like, will you do it even if you receive no healing? Will you do this even if you don't have the authority that you think you want, or if you never get anything that you're asking for? Will you still just show up? Will you still be worshiping me and saying that I'm good? And there was a video that I was watching recently, and the question that they asked was like, do you believe, when it's talking about all of God's promises and the gift of salvation, but more than that, the gift of relationship and identity that we have as sons and daughters of God, and it's like, do you believe that God is that good? And do you believe that God is that good to you? Because those are two separate questions.
Yes.
And how often do we say, like, oh, yeah, he could be that good for Suzy. Suzy's amazing. Like, of course he would do all these things for Suzy, but then it's like, well, would he do it for me? And that becomes a harder question. But so walking through, the biggest thing that's increased my faith has really just been stripping everything back, not knowing if I'd receive any of the promises that I feel like were spoken over my life, and just being like, or even the healing that I'm hoping for. Even if I never receive that, will I still show up in the place that nobody sees?
Mm-hmm.
And will I also not fight to have my voice heard at things too? I think that takes like a position of confidence of like, I don't need to prove myself to other people. Like, I know who I am.
Can you touch on, I thought it was beautiful that what you went through. I think you kind of still are, but definitely one week in particular of how you approach doing things from a place of favor over fear. I thought that was like a beautiful way of how your faith affected just your everyday life for that week.
Yeah, that's it was it was something that I felt like God spoke over just really quietly to me maybe like a week or so ago. And there was just a couple things that had come up that I feel like I just naturally, it started to get my blood pressure a little high, like where it was some stuff with money that we got charged for something that we shouldn't have been charged for at like a gym. And so I had to go deal with that financially, which being on the phone and being slightly confrontational, I'm like, or that scares me rather. So it was just like, okay, I'm kind of going into this. So there was a couple different things that I had this sense of fear around, and they weren't huge things. Like to most people, you're like, I'll just call the gym and say, don't charge me.
But again,
whatever.
it's huge to you.
It's big to me. Mm-hmm. Comparison is a thief of joy. You're right. So like, yeah, just, it was big for me. And there was a couple things, and I also felt for some reason it brought a lot of stress into my life, into my heart. It was just always on the back burner. I was always thinking about it, and I just felt like there was a couple of these things, and God was just like, just approach it from favor over this fear. Do not respond to any text or email or phone call if you can't do it from a place of favor. And the place of favor is, I know whose I am. I know who I am. I'm a daughter of God, like creator of the universe. All of his promises for me, all his goodness for me, the authority that he's given me to bring heaven to earth. Like if I'm operating out of this place of favor, like not that I'm going to get everything I want, but no matter how I approach this situation, if you can approach it from not like, oh, I have fear that this won't go well or whatever. It's like, no matter what happens, I'm walking in favor, and it is with purpose. God is meant for me to have these conversations with these people. Whether I get the money back or not, it doesn't matter, because there's purpose in what I'm about to do. This phone call could change this person's life, even though I'm just calling for, I might be the closest to heaven somebody gets on a given day. So it just like, it changed the way that I approached every person that was put in my path. It approached the phone call. End of the story is not exciting. Like, got the money back. Hallelujah. It was great. And the person also, I noticed they had a cross tattoo. I went in to speak to them in person. The manager had a cross tattoo, and so I started a conversation with her a little bit about that, which was really sweet. But it affected every conversation I had with people. I had some opportunities to pray over people in public spaces, which is, depending on if you're an introvert or extrovert, exciting or terrifying, or both. And that was really cool. And there was just like, sometimes too, my parents were in town, and so people brought, we were at a restaurant, people brought us free food, because I hit it off with them when I came in, because I was just like immediately not talking to them about our reservation. I was talking to them about them. And so they brought us free food. My mom's like, Michaela, oh my gosh, you were walking in the favor of God. And I was just like, nah, Mom, we are. And it was really sweet, though, because I think for her, it was also just a testimony of, and for me, it was a testimony. For my mom, it was like impactful evidence, too, I think, of just like, yeah, that's what walking in favor looks like.
You said something earlier about, like processing through this invitation from God. Would you, even if I don't do this thing for you, do you still want me? And I know for me, sometimes I think through things like that, and I'm like, yeah, but that's, but you're God. You should be better than that. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know if you guys have ever had an arrogant thought, like, it's like,
no, it's just you.
It's a super arrogant thought, but something that I feel like God has reminded me of just a simple question like, Chris, what is it that you want from Suzy? What is it that you want from the person that you're closest to in your life? And what I want from Suzy is, that when I'm incapacitated in life and I have nothing to offer her in return, she loves me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what God wants from us. And, you have this line that I think God gave you a while back. We often want the healing, but we don't want the healer. Mm-hmm. We want the miracle, but we don't want the miracle worker. We want vending machine Jesus. We don't want Jesus. Mm-hmm. And our desire for what he can do for us sometimes gets in the way of our desire just for him. Yeah. There's a beautiful song by Cody Carnes, Nothing Else. And the song is all about, you don't owe me anything. It's my favorite line in the song. You don't owe me anything. I'm just here for you. And that song ministered to my heart for a really long season of my life, and still does to this day, just for that principle. Mm-hmm. That this whole experiment called life is really just about developing a deep and abiding relationship with Jesus. That's what he desperately wants with every single one of us, and is what the thing we were made for. And there's so much nuance to it, and there's all the desires of our heart, and there's all these wonderful things in life, but it all boils down to that. And God works everything out for our good, for those that love him, those that are called according to his purpose, those that have said yes to him. Mm-hmm. The pain, the suffering, the anxiety, the stress, the difficulty, the joys, the victories, all the things are all designed and used by God to help draw us back to himself.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I'll be able to close out the conversation better than that. That was a very, very succinct concluding thought, Chris. So yeah, thank you guys for this almost about an hour, 2 hours almost long conversation. It's been really beautiful. I think everyone that comes on the podcast, including us, are always like, what are we going to talk about? What are the questions? And we're always like, even Michaela today, and she hears about my experience every month, and I'm like, what? She's like, what are we talking about? I'm like, faith. She's like, but what? What about faith? I'm like, I don't know. We'll find out.
We'll see what comes.
And it always is like, goes by so fast, and is always such a meaningful conversation, and that's definitely been true for this topic as well. So
it's been great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
That's all I got.